Good morning, explorers. How are you all doing today? Hopefully, we're all doing great. Thank you so much for joining us for another one of our Aquarium Online Academy programs here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. My name is Cynthia, and I am part of our education department here at the Aquarium. And today, we're going to be exploring the deep sea. So, not exactly what you see behind me, but you'll see everything will tie in just a little bit. If during today's program you do have any questions, any observations, anything that you want to share with us at all, we do have a live text line that you can use. And that number is 562-286-1838. So you can see that number right here on the screen. So once again, you can text in any questions, any thoughts, especially because we're going to be discovering and exploring the deep sea. It's still such a big mystery. I'm still learning a lot about the deep sea, so we are definitely going to be learning together. If you are watching this program after it airs live, so after August 5th, after about 11:30 a.m., you can still share your observations, your questions, any thoughts with us, but instead of using this text line, you're going to want to use our email, and our email is live@lbaop.org. This just ensures that we can still address your questions, see your thoughts and observations in a timely manner, since we are not always at this text line. But again, if you are watching me right now live, you're going to want to use this text line. But if you are watching after we have aired live, you're going to want to use our email. So to start off, I mentioned we're going to be learning about the deep sea today. When I say the words deep sea, what do you think of? If you close your eyes, that's what I think of. It's just darkness. It's really dark down in the deep sea, right? What are some other things you imagine? Look, this is the deep sea. Is there anything that you imagine here floating around? Like me? Do you imagine me floating around down in the deep sea? That'd be cool and I wouldn't really mind, but no. None of us are floating around in the deep sea. Are there any animals that come to mind? Any specific habitats or anything like that? Ooh, look at what's appeared behind me. So, we do have some pictures of the deep sea. But how are we able to get pictures of the deep sea? How are we able to explore the deep sea? A few different things to think about. Because us as humans, we wouldn't be able to go down to the deep sea and swim around and take pictures, right? So there's very special things that have been built in order to explore the deep sea, to take pictures, and a lot of those are different types of robots. So there's different explorer vessels like this that are able to go down into the deep sea, take pictures, and sometimes even take samples of different things, whether that be of different rock structures if they're trying to figure out how exactly old is this rock. Do you know how to tell the age of a rock by looking at it? I don't either. So these different little explorer vessels can take samples. This one's known as the Sebastian. So they're able to take those samples and bring it back up to the scientists who are hanging out on a boat on the surface. And then they're able to take a closer look at all the different things that these different rovers were able to collect. Okay, what are some other ways that you think that other people are able to explore the deep sea? How are we able to explore the deep sea? We're able to explore the deep sea by looking at different things like this, right? And maybe if you end up being a deep sea scientist, if that is your life's goal, which I mean, that's still my life goal in a way. I would love to go down to the deep sea. Maybe you'd get the opportunity like these two people, and they're able to get into this vessel and then go down and actually see the deep sea. Very few people have had the opportunity to do this, but I can only imagine what you would be able to see. So, some different ways that we can explore, and even just talking about the deep sea or you tuning into this program today is one way we can definitely all explore the deep sea as well. What I want to start off by doing today, however, is comparing some different things in the deep sea and the deep sea habitat compared to some other more local-ish habitats that me and you might be a little bit more familiar with. So, to start off, as I mentioned, this is not the deep sea. What are we looking at here? We're looking at a coral reef, right? What do you notice about this coral reef? Do you notice that it's really colorful? There's all different types of colors in here, from yellows to greens to some grays. Some of these fish have yellow tails, to pinks to purples. Is it dark in here or is it really bright? It's really bright, right? So you can see the lights and the sun that's coming into this exhibit. Out in the ocean, the coral reefs will also be the same way with a lot of sunlight. So I want to go ahead today, as we take notes and compare these different habitats, I want to go ahead and make a double bubble map. I believe the other name that you might know it as is a Venn diagram, but we're going to make it a double bubble because that's how I grew up calling it. So here, we'll make one circle. Ooh, I don't like that circle. If your circle's not perfect, that's fine, friends. Here we go. And then you're going to make another circle, and they're going to overlap. So here are our two bubbles. So on this side, I'm going to write, I didn't think this through. Here we go. Coral reef plus kelp forest. Spoiler alert, we're going to be looking at the kelp forest too and comparing it. And then over on the other side, I'm going to go ahead and write deep sea. So the way that this double bubble map works is on this side, we're going to write things that we notice about the coral reef and kelp forest with our observations. Over on this side, we'll write what we notice and observe about the deep sea. Then in the middle, things that are similar is what we're going to write here. So shared characteristics. So far, we mentioned that the coral reef is colorful. It's very bright. I'm going to draw a little sun next to it so I know I'm referring to the sun, that it's bright. And I would say, what would you say about all the different animals that you saw? Was there a good variety of them? Yeah, if you're saying yeah, I would definitely agree with you. So I'm going to write the word diverse in here. And then just so I know that this is in regards to my coral reef, I'm going to make a little bracket and I'm going to write C.R. You can write out the word coral reef. I'm just being a little bit lazy and I don't have enough room. So here we go. Those are my coral reef characteristics right there. What have we talked about in regards to the deep sea already? We mentioned that the deep sea is dark. I'm going to write darks in all caps. Dark. What else did you notice about the deep sea? If you want to write that we explore via rover, you can write that. Because how are you able to explore a coral reef versus the deep sea? For a coral reef, if you ever get the opportunity, you could go there, you could snorkel, you could swim above the coral, you could dive with the coral. I've actually had the chance to go snorkeling with coral for the first time last year, and that was really, really cool, being able to see coral in person. So I'm going to put for exploring, snorkeling, diving, and I'm just going to write etc. because there's lots of different ways. I would say, potentially, depending, is that exploring a coral reef might be a little bit easier for a lot of us than to explore, here we go, than to explore the deep sea. Okay, so there's some differences here. But what if I told you that there was also corals in the deep sea? Did you know that? Do you think that they're going to be exactly like the corals that are inside of this tropical exhibit that we have here? These corals that live in warm water, that really need the sunlight to survive. They're going to be a little bit different, right? Because we've mentioned the deep sea is really dark. So there's no sun reaching the corals down in the deep sea, but they're still surviving. So they have different adaptations, right? But look at these corals here. So all these different structures, they look different just like all the different types of corals in that warmer water, but they're able to survive in the dark and in these colder waters in the deep sea. But these reefs, just like the reefs that are closer to the surface in that warm water, can also get really big. One of the largest deep sea corals is out in Hawaii. I want to say it's a type of gold coral, and it stretches around 20 to 25 miles long. So it's a huge deep sea coral. And that deep sea coral is hundreds of years old. So just like it takes this coral that's in the warm water a really long time to grow really nice and healthy, it's the same exact weight for this deep sea coral as well. So you can also see it's still kind of colorful, right? It's kind of red and yellow. There is, I think this is a type of coral. This is more of a whitish color. Ooh, okay, yes. My friend Stewie, if you were here for the last program, is still here. And he is saying it looks like this is a softer type of coral. So just like in those warmer waters, more towards the surface, are softer and harder corals. It's the same exact way also down in the deep sea. That's really cool, right? Seeing how there's deep sea coral and also other types of coral towards the surface. Ooh, and here it looks like in this video, they are exploring more corals down in the deep sea. Ooh, I really like this coral. It's really pretty in my opinion. But you can see all the different colors within it. So the pinkish color, all the different structures. Look at that one. There is a crab inside of it. I think it's eating. If you see its little mouth, I think is trying to catch things. So that's cool, because animals will also hang out in the coral reefs in the warmer water, right? Like we're seeing some of those fish. Some smaller fish like to do this within the corals in the warmer waters. So animals in the deep sea will also use corals for protection, to hide away from predators. That's really, really cool. So I want to go ahead and write some of these things down because we can see there are definitely some similarities. So let me see. I'm trying to decide what color to write the middle with. Here we go. So here I'm going to put coral reefs in both. What did we notice too? Animals use it in similar ways. Okay. One thing I like doing with my double bubble map too is if I notice that things are similar, I like writing arrows. So I would say, would you say that this coral within the deep sea we were looking at is still pretty colorful? I would say it's pretty colorful even though it's a dark place. So, oop, that marker does not work. 1 second, friends. Okay, so let me circle colorful and I'm going to write an arrow to it. That being similar. I would still say there's no sun for the deep sea coral. There's a diverse amount of animals that live within the warmer water coral. Do you think only crabs are using deep sea coral or also other smaller fish and different little animals that live in the deep sea? I would say there's probably still a diverse amount of animals also exploring that coral and using it to their benefit. So I'm going to write an arrow there as well. Okay, so we've covered our coral reefs and compared those two. Let's go ahead and look at a kelp forest now. Let's see if there's any similar things that we notice there compared to the deep sea. So, kelp forest, to me at least, because I work here in Long Beach and I live not too far from here, are pretty local to me. Depending on where you live, maybe coral reefs are more local to you, maybe kelp forests are more local to you, maybe wetlands are more local to you. It really varies. But for me, it's the kelp forest. So if I were to go out into the ocean right now, it's pretty cold out in the ocean, right? So just like the deep sea, the kelp forest is cold. The deep sea is, of course, a little bit colder. But let's see what else we can notice about this kelp forest. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds just for you to make some observations. I want you to think about, is there any similarities you can potentially think of from the animals to the kelp to other characteristics, non-living or living? I'm still here. I'm just here quietly so you can think and observe. what are some things that you've been able to notice? So we can definitely see also a pretty diverse habitat, right? From smaller fish to bigger fish and everything. You can see all the kelp that grows really nice and long. Do you know what kelp is? Do you think it's a plant? Do you think it's something simpler? That's a little bit of a hard question, right? So I want to let you know that kelp is a type of algae. So it's even simpler than that of a plant. So if you're wondering what the difference is, this is how I think about it. So plants, if we were plants, we would dig our toes into the sand and into the dirt, right? You have all your roots, and then from your toes being in the dirt, imagine that your toenails are your roots, and they would grow really, really long. And then someone needs to water you, right? So I would trust my friend Stewie to water me. But if I were an algae, instead of having to dig my feet into the sand or into the dirt, I would just need to plant my feet somewhere, wherever. It doesn't matter if I'm on a rock, on the sand, or on the dirt, but I don't have roots. So my roots wouldn't grow. I wouldn't have to worry about my friend Stewie forgetting about me because I don't need the same things that a plant does because I need much less. I just need a little bit of a sunlight and some healthy water and I would be okay. So that's why kelp is an algae because it just attaches itself to whatever thing out there, whether it be rocks, dirt, sand, and then it grows and grows from there. And you can notice a lot of the things that it's attaching itself to, especially the way we have our exhibit set up here at the aquarium, are these rocks. So rocks are really important for our kelp forest ecosystem just because of everything that occurs in there. Are there any other observations that you were able to make about this habitat that we're looking at? If so, you can always add them to your double bubble map if you're making one, or you can always text it into us. But I'm going to go ahead and add in these things that we were able to notice here. So I'm going to reverse my colors for the kelp forest. So I'm going to say, do you think that the kelp forest was as colorful as the coral reef, or do you think it was a little bit more muted, a little bit less colorful? I would agree with less colorful. I'm going to use the word muted just so. I'm going to put muted colors actually. And if you want in parentheses, you can put green, brown, gray. Okay. We talked about how the kelp still needs sunlight, along with some of the animals that you can find in there. A lot of those animals won't be going down to the deep sea. There are some animals that will live everywhere in the ocean. They can live up on the surface, they can live down in the deep sea, but some animals will just stay in those specific areas where you can find them and not really travel anywhere else. And some of those animals are going to need the sun. So I'm going to put sunlight over here. Then we noticed rocky structures. So I'm going to put rocky structures. I wrote into here, but that's fine. What else did we notice? We also noticed it was diverse, right? And we already have diverse up here, though. So I'm just going to put a star right here that we're definitely noticing. The kelp forest, the coral reef is diverse. And we drew a little arrow over here. So is the deep sea. And we'll explore some of those animals in just a little bit. Do any of these remind you of anything that we've seen in the deep sea so far? Let's see if we can see another picture of the deep sea. That one that we saw a little bit earlier that looked a little bit less frequented, but it was pretty rocky, right? So here we go. You can still see there's all these rock structures out there. It looks like there's a lot of sand slash dirt slash mud through this picture, but you can definitely see all these rocks. Do you think, apart from these rocks, that there's also different types of algae that like to live down in the deep sea, that are able to attach themselves down on the rocks, or different types of plants even? Well, we know that the kelp needs sunlight, but so did the coral, and there's still deep sea coral. There's also different types of algae that can live down in the deep sea. So that's another similarity as to how these different things are able to adapt in different ways. So I'm going to go ahead and write these similarities on my map over here. So I would say I'm going to circle rocky structures. I'm going to put an arrow to right over here. There's algae in both of them, which is something I'm going to add. Well, and really, all three of them. There's algae in the coral reef, in the kelp forest, and in the deep sea. So I'm going to write a star right next to that. We still don't need sunlight. We noticed the kelp forest had muted colors. The deep sea also has some muted colors. It can both be colorful and muted. So I'm going to circle that and put an arrow. So you can see there's a lot of similarities, even though these habitats look a little bit different, right? So you can find all of these different things in all different parts of the ocean, which is one of my favorite things, especially is to have visuals just like this so we can always reference them if you're ever thinking about the deep sea and different habitats, what it's composed of, some of its characteristics. So now I want to go ahead and even look more specifically at some animals. Maybe we can find some similarities between animals that live closer to the surface, animals that live in the deep sea, or animals that live in both. So I want to go ahead and start with one of my favorite animals in the deep sea, which are Japanese spider crabs. I love spider crabs because if they want, they can come and hang out in the surface of the ocean, but they can also go down to the deep sea. So they're able to really experience two different or similar, like we've learned, habitats. So let's see what observations we can make. Have you seen a spider crab before? Here we go. So, what are you able to notice about it? What observations can you make? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds just for you to make some observations on your own, and then we can talk a little bit more about them together. And if you have any thoughts, once again, you can always text them into us as to what you're able to notice about these animals. So I mentioned their names are Japanese spider crabs. So you can find them in areas of Japan, Taiwan, so places with a little bit of warmer water, but they can also live in really cold places like the deep sea. They tend to spend some time at the surface when they want to spawn, so when they want to have their babies. But because of what they eat and what they like to eat, they actually like the deep sea a lot. Is there anything about this spider crab that you can notice that makes you feel as to, or as, sorry friends, I got tongue tied. Is there anything about this spider crab that you notice that might help it be able to survive in a habitat like the deep sea? Look at its shell. Is it really smooth or is it bumpy? It's pretty bumpy, right? You can see it has bumps. It even looks like it has little spikes all over it. What could that help it blend in with? What can it camouflage with? Have you heard that word before? Camouflage? Just for a refresher, in case you haven't, that means that they're able to blend in with their surroundings. So this spider crab having a shell like this would help it blend in with all of those rocky structures, whether it be in the surface, right? Because we know that there's rocky structures at the surface, or down in the deep sea, like the rocky structures we were looking at. So that's one of those similarities that you can see there. And this animal likes hanging out in the deep sea because they really, really like to eat dead things, whether that be dead animals or dead plants. So, just as we know, at some point in an animal's lives, eventually they'll have to die. But for really big animals like whales or bigger fish, if they die up here at the surface, they're not just going to suddenly disappear. It's all going to fall down. So just like we have snow here at the mountains, there's also snow in the deep sea. But it's not the type of snow that me and you know. It's known as marine snow. That's a really fancy way of saying that it's a decayed animal that is falling apart and coming down. It looks really pretty, but it's not the type of snow you would want to play with. So animals down in the deep sea, or animals like the spider crab who can go down into the deep sea, love that because they're able to just go and eat and scavenge apart these animals, or just find the little pieces that have fallen off and they're able to eat that. So that's one of the ways that the spider crab likes to eat, because it doesn't require much energy, much time, or anything like that. And then if they wanted, after being down in the deep sea, they're able to travel back up to the surface. But a lot of their time is going to be spent down in the deep sea. So this is one of those animals that can spend time kind of all over the ocean, which I always feel is really, really cool. So I want to go ahead and move on to our next animal, which might be an animal that you're very familiar with because they are very, very popular, which are known as anglerfish. Anglerfish are another one of my favorite animals just because they're pretty weird. And we've seen them in potentially in a lot of different things depending on what you've read, what you've seen. They come out in movies, they come out in books, and in these past recent months, there have even been anglerfish that have washed up on the beach. This is a very, very strange occurrence, friends, because the deep sea also can be quite different from the ocean that me and you like to explore. Me and you are able to, if you have gotten the chance to, go out into the ocean and go swim around and everything. We don't have to worry about anything. But I've mentioned, me and you can't just go swimming down in the deep sea. Do you know why that is? Apart from it being really deep. Secondly, it really has to do with the pressure. If you have ever gone on a drive up the mountains or the altitude, or if you've ever gone on an airplane or stuff like that, you might have felt your ears get clogged, and then you have to chew gum, or you have to do the swallow thing. If you know what I'm talking about and you've experienced this, it's like when you swallow to try and unclog your ears. So imagine that times 100. That's how the pressure in the deep sea is. So we wouldn't be able to survive that. But these different animals are able to. So that's one of the things about that. But when these animals, like the anglerfish, have washed up on our beaches, that's a really big pressure change. But when they found these different anglerfish, they were almost in perfect condition, which doesn't quite add up. So that's one of the big studies and everything that is currently going on. So, do you recognize this animal? Do you recognize the anglerfish from anything? Maybe you do. And if you don't, that's completely fine. We can make some observations together. How big is my question is how big do you think this fish is? Do you think it's this big? Do you think it's this big? Do you think it's this big? A lot of people tend to think the anglerfish is really big, but the anglerfish, the biggest it gets is around 3 feet. So not very big. If you turned into our class before this, we were talking about sharks and how a lot of sharks don't get quite big, and they only get about 3 feet, which is the length of my arm. So this is about as big as an anglerfish can get. It's about almost the size. Oh no, this picture's a little bit bigger than 3 feet from the way that it is. But it's about the size as to what we're looking at right now. So they're not very big. So they have other ways to protect themselves though. If you look at like their tail back here, it looks really spiky and pointy. And it is pretty spiky and pointy. They have all these spines all over their bodies. So like that, if animals try to eat them, these spines can protect them. But one of their main things that can help them survive down in the deep sea is this right here, which is called a lure. So we've mentioned the deep sea is really, really dark. So a lot of animals in the deep sea will have the special adaptation of being able to create their own light or emit light in some type of way. So the anglerfish, this lure, is able to light up. So if it's looking for food, this anglerfish will flash its light on and off, on and off. So if another fish is swimming on by and says, what is that light? Because they don't see light too often. It will go near that light, and then the anglerfish is able to eat it. The anglerfish has really sharp, long teeth, and they're also able to eat things that are double their size. So those mouths are able to open up really nice and big to be able to eat all of these different things down in the deep sea, which is really important because even food can sometimes be hard to come by down in the deep sea depending on what the animal's diet is. So this lure that they have is one way that they're able to attract all of these different animals. And you'll find special different ways that animals are able to emit light down in the deep sea in order to be able to survive. I am seeing though, friends, we are all out of time. I could definitely talk about the deep sea for a long time because there's just so many different animals with so many special adaptations that exist down in the deep sea. So I definitely encourage you all to keep exploring the deep sea. If you have any questions at all, feel free to email them to us as well. We do have another activity that goes hand in hand with this program. In case you want to continue exploring the deep sea, if you visit the Aquarium of the Pacific's website, and then go over to Aquarium Online Academy page. All of our programs from this week actually have more activities, whether it be crafts, observations, or different guided activities for you to do. You can do so, especially with the deep sea. And if you want to continue learning about the deep sea with me, next Wednesday at 10 a.m., we will be having a Spanish deep sea class. We'll be exploring some different animals. But other than that, thank you so much, friends. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye.